Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel M Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous tropical beach painting. I'm going to teach you how to mix realistic colours to create perspective and depths in your painting, how to use highlights and shadows to create realism, how to blend and paint ocean tropical water, and then how to paint really easy waves over the top. We're going to learn how to paint a beach, and we're going to create a fence and a nice walkway down to the ocean, and then how to paint realistic palm trees. Really easy, using different types of brushes and techniques to create a really realistic tropical beach acrylic painting. So let's get into it. So for the tutorial I used the following colours. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange, sap green, light green, bright green, turquoise, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, iris purple, raw umber brown and Payne's grey. Now I've got a little canvas that I've just used an outline. I've got 1/3 as the sky and 2/3 as the ocean and the beach. We're going to have a nice blue sky and we're going to put some faraway mountains that we're going to use cobalt blue to push them far off to create sort of a tropical island in the background. We're going to have a big hanging palm tree and some overhanging trees and leaves either side. We're going to have a beautiful turquoise tropical water ocean, and then we're going to have a nice golden sand beach and some fence posts just to create some perspective and take you down onto the beach. So if you'd like to pause the outline and copy down the outline on the painting, feel free to do so, and we'll start with the tutorial. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create two different blues, which you've often seen me do to create a sky colour. So the first thing is I'm going to create some cerulean blue, a tiny bit of cobalt blue and lots of white. So cerulean blue, a tiny bit of cobalt blue and lots of white, just to make a nice pastel blue. So let's add more white. Loads and loads of white. We want it really pastel, and this is going to be our lighter shade of sky. So this is going to be the shade at the horizon, and then we're going to get the same two colors. We're just going to add a little bit more cobalt blue and cerulean blue together, and we're going to add a little bit of purple and less white. Just going to put a little bit in this one just to make it more white. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue, tiny dot of purple and just less white in the second one, and you should have a nice darker pastel blue, and that's what we're going to use for the top of the sky. So the horizon's always lighter and the top of the sky is always darker. So what we're going to do, we've got these two colors that we've mixed. So that's me just showing you what colors I've used. We're going to use the lighter color at the horizon and the darker color at the top. Now I'm just going to swap to a bigger brush, and we're just going to block in using the lighter colour at the horizon here. Don't worry about if you go over your horizon or anything like that. We'll use painting tape in a minute to get a straight horizon. We just want to block in the very bottom of our sky where it touches the ocean with this light pastel blue. So there we go. We're just going to go up about 1/3 in the sky with this nice pastel blue. And then we're going to get the darker of the two colours, and we're just going to frame the corners. So all we're going to do is go right up to the edges, and we're just going to block her in. And then as we come down, we're just going to swap back to the lighter shade and just mix the two together. And in the middle, we're just going to mix them together. So all I'm doing, I'm creating X shapes with my brush, and we just blend in the two shades of blue together. So the lighter blue at the bottom, the darker blue at the top. And what it should do is create a nice fading out sky. Now what you can do, if you want to, is add a little bit of white just at the horizon and just do the same trick. And again, it just makes it look like the sky is just fading out into the distance. So really easy. Have it really pastel at the bottom. Have some of that pastel blue in the middle, and then get darker as you go up. Now, as I say, don't worry so much if you've gone over your line, what we're going to do now is we're going to dry our painting, and we're just going to measure a straight line, and we're just going to put some painting tape over the top. So please dry your painting before you put the tape over the top, because you don't want to pull off what you've just painted. And what we're going to do, we're going to use cobalt blue and some purple. So I've got this cool iris purple and some cobalt blue. So we're going to mix purple and blue together. And we're going to create sort of a far off rocky mountain. So we're going to add some raw umber brown to turn it more grey. So this little colour combination is fantastic for painting far off things into the distance. So when you look off into the distance, you might have buildings or mountains or anything like that. By combining lots of cobalt blue, a little bit of purple and some raw umber brown, and we're just going to add a little bit of white to make it more pastel and less harsh, but it's still quite dark. So let's get plenty on my brush, and what we're going to do, we're going to come right down to the tape, and we're just going to make it nice and bobbly at the top, and we're going to create the illusion of far off mountains. So if you ever see like a place like Hawaii or anywhere nice and tropical, they have these sort of big cliff tops with all like rainforest on it, like Jurassic Park. So what we're going to do, we're just going to create this using this blue and purple and brown. If I zoom in for you, we're going to make it look like it's really far away. And the technical way we're doing that is, what it is if the sky is blue, a little hum of that sort of colour is going on top of these mountains, and it's just making it look like they're far off into the distance. So we're just going to block that in, and because we've got our painting tape, we can go right down to the bottom, and we're going to have a nice straight horizon. And by making your mountains just chunkier here on the left, and then sort of going diagonally down here on the right, we can make them look like they're fading off into the distance. So by making this area diagonally downwards and just making it smaller, we could even have a little island far off into the distance, like Castaway. It could be just like a little tropical island out at sea. So let's just link them up. That could be cool. So we're going to make sure that's dry. And all we're going to do is we're going to put some highlights over the top to make it look texturized. So we're going to get some sap green. So let's get some green, and we're just going to add it to our mix. So by adding this cobalt blue mix that we've got, what it does is it sucks out the vibrancy of the color. Can you see that? So that's it, really nice and bright. And this is when we mix it with this blue and white and brown and purple. And all we're going to do at the top of mountains, and especially in tropical areas, you get lots of, as I say, rainforest, you get sort of grassy banks. We're just going to go over the top, and we're just going to leave gaps. And all I'm doing, I've just got a small brush, but I've got loads of paint on the end, and I'm just making splats, and I'm leaving gaps for that blue to shine through. And these are just all the areas that have a little bit of trees or rocky tops, and they've got some grass on the top. So we're just adding some texture. And then down here at the bottom, you probably have loads of palm trees and stuff where the beach and the ocean sort of meets. And you tend to have lots of trees at the sort of horizon, don't you? So let's just put some trees. It could be far off into the distance. There we go. And then let's just put a little hint at the top of some green just on this island. So we've got this lovely light blue horizon which we mixed, which was cerulean blue, a tiny dot of cobalt blue and white. And all we're going to do, we're just going to mix a tiny bit of brown into that colour. So the exact same colour we mixed for the horizon, we're just going to put a tiny bit of brown into it and make this sort of really nice sort of beigey grey. We're just going to add a tiny bit of our background colour and we'll try it out. And all we're going to do with our sort of fine liner, we're going to do the same technique where we're leaving gaps for that dark blue base colour to shine through. And we're just going to put sort of ridges going down that look like cliffs. Can you see how that works? So by leaving little gaps for that blue to shine through, it just looks like areas that are in the shade. And by using this nice sort of sky blue with brown, it just looks like areas that are in the sunlight. It's a really, really easy technique. You can use this on any painting that you're trying to create distance. Now where we've put the green on, it looks a bit harsh and we want to make this nice and soft. So let's just get some of our base colour and just mix it a bit more into the green. I think our green is just a little bit too harsh. So let's just go over the top by mixing some of the base colour in with the green just to make it less harsh. We're going to leave some little hints of the previous colour just to look like some areas that are really in the shade. We're just going to soften her up. If you imagine this is really, really far into the distance, so we want to use pastel sort of colours that aren't very vibrant, that they've had all the colours sort of taken out with the vibrancy taken out, and that will push it back. And let's just get some of that base colour. And let's just make this area a bit more in the shade. Let's make it more purpley and blue. So the great thing about acrylics is, look, you can just colour over areas. So they dry so quick. So you can just glaze over the top. And what will happen is you can still see the impression of what was there before. But you've just changed the colour. So by just using some of the background colour, look, we can just soften areas up. We want to push this mountain really far back. So a good way to do that is you can just smear it with your brush. You don't want to have a huge jump in colours, or you can even use your finger just to smear it. So now I've done that, and that green looks a lot more blended and less harsh. I'm just going to go back to my highlight colour and just put my highlights back in because some of them look a bit ropey. So look, if you've changed anything, there's nothing we can't just fix. So I'm just, while it's wet, I'm just putting in these highlights. And look, if you get a really harsh one because you've picked up too much paint, you can smear it with your fingers just to make it less harsh. So that's all nice and blended. But look, if I pick up way too much paint and that looks a bit cartoony, I can just go over the top and just soften it, or use my fingers just to soften it and push it back even more. I don't want anything harsh. Just going to put a little bit of green just here. Just get our colour for our highlights. So all it is the horizon colour, which is lots and lots of white, cerulean blue, a little bit of cobalt blue, and some raw umber brown. And I'm just making it a shade darker with some cobalt blue, just here on the left, because these areas are getting less light, they get more shadow. So if I just add a little bit more cobalt blue, I can make it a bit bluer and darker. Let's just have them coming down. So you can use this painting recipe for anything. If you're wanting to do faraway buildings or faraway mountains, you can use this colour and you can make things look really far into the distance. And if we remove our tape, dun 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 dun, we should have these fantastic faraway mountains. Look at that. So we've got this nice blue dark left hand side in the shade, and we've got the highlights coming to the right. And cause they're nice and blue, we can dry them, and then we can put painting tape over the top, and we can concentrate on the ocean. So with an ocean, it's deeper, obviously, the further out you go, and more shallow as we come into the beach. So we're going to use different colours to imply that. So we've got this colour, which I've left off the list because I've made it. It's basically, it's like electric blue. It's basically cerulean blue and a little bit of turquoise. So cerulean blue and a little bit of turquoise, and you should get this sort of like a electric blue. It's just a very bright blue. We're going to add some cobalt blue just to make it more navy. So cerulean blue, turquoise, and a little bit of cobalt blue just to make it darker. And we'll go right up to our tape. So again, please make sure that your mountains were all dry before you put some painting tape down, because you don't want to take off what you've just worked. I'm just going to add a little bit more cobalt blue just to make it look a bit deeper. So the darker the colour, the deeper the ocean. So by using turquoise and blue, we don't want it too deep, but we want to make it look like it's fading off again into the distance. And as we come towards the beach, we want to get more shallow. So we're going to use turquoise. So we're going to use this colour, and we're just going to add that to the mix. So we're just going to get more turquoise as we come towards the beach. So we're just going to blend that in. And then this colour is turquoise and white underneath. So all we're going to do, look, is just combine turquoise and white, and you should get this colour. So we're going to get some of that. So just turquoise and white, and we're just going to gently blend it in. We're going to create our X shapes with our brush, and we're going to imply that the water is more shallow as it comes towards the beach and deeper as it fades off into the distance. So easy trick. Again, just like the islands, once you know how to do this, you can do this all the time on your own paintings. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you find these tips, these painting tips helpful. And please make sure you like the videos, because it is really good for the algorithm to push the videos to other artists that want to learn. So thank you so much for everyone supporting the channel and liking and subscribing. So what we're going to do, we're going to get some of the horizon colour, which was white, cerulean blue, and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And we're just going to use that colour here, and this is going to be the wet sand. So when the water comes up to the beach, you get sort of wet sand where it sort of retracts back and the sand's all wet and shiny. And all we're going to do is use the horizon colour, so it looks like the sky is reflected in that sand. So really easy. And again, we're just going to gently blend it so we've got no harsh sort of edges. We want all our transitions to be really nice and soft. Here we go. So you can use a blender brush if you choose to at home, if you find that easier. So look, I'm just going back and forth with the turquoise and white and the horizon colour, and I'm just making it nice and soft so you barely notice the changing colour. And then if we remove our tape, dun 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 dun, we should have a perfectly straight horizon. Now don't worry if you get any little gaps or anything where you've missed a bit with your tape. You can always dry your work with a hairdryer and paint over it. So with our wet sand, we're just going to get some purple, some yellow, a tiny dot of orange. So purple, some yellow, a tiny dot of orange, and some white to make it very, very pastel. We're going to create a sort of warm orangey grey, and just under our horizon colour we're just going to have a bit of sand that is also wet, but it's dry. It's more in the sun. It's less soaking and shimmering. So we're just going to put that nice edge, just so again there's a nice definition between that and the beach. And then we're just going to add loads of white to the mix, and a tiny bit of our sky colour. And again, I'm just going to make it less harsh. I'm just going to go over the top of it. And it should look like where the water has gone over the top and sort of left a mark on the sand. So again, just want to gently blend it. If you find the videos too fast, you can always just pause it, just go at your own speed, but you just want to have it really, really soft. And if you're like me, look, and you smear it or anything, you can use your fingers. You want to just try and get it that all the blending is really, really subtle, that you don't notice the changing colours. And then we're going to get some cobalt blue and some turquoise. And we're going to create a wave. So we're going to learn how to paint a wave. So I'm going to use a flat brush, because flat brushes are much easier for doing a painting a straight line. So we're going to combine turquoise and cobalt blue. And I'm going to use this outer edge of this flat brush. And I'm going to try to create sort of a straight line going across. Now, if you're nervous at home, you can always use painting tape and measure a straight line and just get a bit like what we did with the mountains. You can just come down and just go across. But I think I'm pretty good. So I'm going to just do it freehand. But don't worry if your wave is kind of bobbly, because waves are, because they're moving. So you don't want it perfectly straight anyway. And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to create this nice thin wave coming up towards the shore. And then we're going to put some white in the mix. And just make it a little bit less harsh. And then just here we're going to have where the water just sort of comes into the bay onto the beach. And it creates a little shadow. So if we use that first, we can put that nearer. And then we're going to get the horizon colour, which was white, cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And we're going to put some sea foam in our wave. So what we're going to do, just at the outer edge, we're going to leave that nice light blue sort of edge. And we're just going to create some sea foam as it sort of hits the beach. So all we're doing, we're just creating a nice thick edge. We'll see how it looks and we can always change it afterwards. And then I'm just going to use the tip of the brush, the very angle edge, and I'm just going to create some sea foam in my waves. So you can use a fine liner if you find that easier. But basically we just want to have some of the waves crashing down. Again in the middle, so it creates something for the viewer to look down the middle. We've got our pathway. And we're going to have our palm tree and everything. So by having the wave kind of in the middle, it gets the viewer to make it look like they're walking down this beach towards this lovely, beautiful tropical ocean. Okay, so look, you can swap to a fine line if you find that easier. And I'm just going to get some titanium white. I'm just going to go over the top of it. I think the sky blue is just a little bit bland, so by just getting some titanium white you can just go over the top. And as I say, by using a really small fine liner it's much easier just to do fine detail. So look, just go over the top, just colour her in. This could be a big surfing wave. There we go. So take your time. Try to relax. And if you make a mistake like me, look, if you put too much paint, there's no bother, we can always fix it. So don't get yourself in a jam, don't get stressed. Look, you can always get some of the background colour and just fill it back in. So there's nothing with painting you can't fix. So there we go. Put some blue back in. And then I'm just going to use some white just here on the edge. I think my paint is still a bit wet, so let's get loads of it. There we go. Sometimes with acrylics, you need to dry your work sometimes for the paint to go over the top and take, because it will just, because they're water based, it will just absorb the colour below. So if you find that your white looks really vibrant at first, and then 10 minutes later it dries and it looks a bit naff and a bit rubbish, you can always dry it and just repaint over the top. So don't be afraid to just air dry it, or just use a hairdryer and just go over the top just to make your whites look more vibrant. So what I'm doing, I'm just leaving a hint of that light blue underneath, just so it looks like a shadow of the wave. And I'm just deliberately making this area a little bit bobbly, so it looks like a nice wave just coming into the beach, into the shore. Here we go. Now you can, if you want to, you can create some little zigzags, just interlinking the bottom with the outer edge of the crashing wave, just to look like sea foam. It's totally up to you, you don't have to. But it's just a little trick. All I'm doing, look, I'm just creating zigzags, just little splats with my brush. As I say, they look really vibrant now, but sometimes they dry really flat and you have to go over them. But it's just an added little touch. And what I try to do, I just come out diagonally from the middle, just so it looks like they're more 3D, and then I just come straight down from the middle. So try having quite random, don't have them all the same, just little splats. Some interlink into the edge, some not. And then we're going to swap back to our flat brush, and we're going to get our horizon colour. So I'm just going to get some of that light blue. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to create really, really tiny thin waves off into the distance. So if you're nervous about this, before you start, make sure your painting is dry and have some baby wipes handy, or a wet cloth. And if you make a mistake, you can just wipe it away and your lovely blended sea will still be there. But all I'm doing, look, I'm just loading up the brush and I'm just going really finely, just creating little divots. And these are all the bits of the sky sort of reflecting down on these waves, and it gives it just more texture, just to make it look more 3D. So again, it's really, really subtle. You won't notice it unless you're really zoomed in like we are, really close to the painting. But it's just another way to create a 3D look and make your work look more realistic. And all it is the sky reflecting down onto the waves. That's all it is. And by leaving gaps, it just looks like waves moving. Excuse the light, I think I keep walking in front of it. So I'm just going to mix some cobalt blue and cerulean blue together, and a tiny bit of that turquoise, and just a little bit of brown just to make it more grey. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue, tiny bit of turquoise, and a little bit of brown. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to create again the opposite. So think of yin and yang. I'm just going to create some shadows. So these are the areas where the waves getting less sun, and it creates caps of waves. So you've got the combination of the two. You've got the highlights and the shadows. It's the same principle. There we go. Now when I zoom out and I get out of the way of my lights, so excuse me if you're getting bleached with bright light at home like a gremlin, it should look pretty realistic. And as I say, look, by just going over your whites, if they've dried flat and absorbed some of the colour below, don't worry, it's very normal with acrylics. Just go over your whites to make them look sparkling. So a lot of time with tutorials, obviously I'm editing this at home. It's just not realistic. So this is why I'm trying to teach you all at home. it's fantastic that you watch me and it's fantastic that you learn, but actually doing this in real life, you'll learn the tricks of the trade by actually doing it. So I really appreciate you watching me, and I really appreciate all the support. But as I say, you won't know little things like this, like the white drying a bit flat, and you need to do it twice unless you're actually painting along at home and using acrylics. So sometimes a lot of tricks that I'm telling you, you won't know until you actually experience it. And that's how you get better. So where I've cocked up here and I've smeared my white, I'm just putting some blue. And now I've smeared my blue. So as I say, we all make mistakes. But don't worry, don't get yourself stressed if you do. Just do what I do. Look, use your finger and just blend it. Or use a baby wipe. Okay, so let's get some turquoise. And I'm just going to, now this wave's dry, I'm just going to glaze over the top of it. So a bit like what we did with the mountains, this area is totally dry. I'm just going to get some turquoise and I'm just rubbing. I've got hardly any paint on my brush. And my brush is dry, so it's really nice and soft. And it's almost like putting makeup on your cheeks, I guess. It's literally, I'm just rubbing this turquoise over the top, and it's just glazing this wave, and it's just making it look less cartoony and more realistic because it's a similar colour, so it's less harsh. So I'm just going over the top and just glazing it. There we go. And then let's just fix that where I blended it. And let's put some of my white sea foam back. So if you change anything, just remember to put it back. It's a bit repetitive sometimes because, as I say, with all these tutorials, even though I'm trying to paint this step by step so you can follow along, even I make mistakes and I have to change things. So it's not always A, B, C. Sometimes it's A, B, C, D, then back to A. And you have to fix things, if that kind of makes sense. But that's what's fun about it. It's learning. So there we go, just put my sea foam back in. Just like it looks like all these waves are crashing into the shore. And just making this a little bit brighter with a second coat of white. There we go. Why don't we extend the wave? Why don't we make it look a bit bigger? Because I'm staring right at it now and I think it's a little bit flat. So let's come a little bit more to the left and make this side look a bit more fruity and funky. So just by using a really fine line, I'm just going to make it look like it's crashing and coming over just here on the left. Looks better. Now we're going to mix some white and some yellow, and we're going to start painting the beach. So white, lots and lots and lots of white, and a little dot of yellow, and the tiniest dot of purple. So lots and lots of white, a dot of cad yellow just to make it off-white, look more vanilla-y sort of colour, and a tiny dot of purple just to make it look a little bit not as vibrant and not as cartoony. And we're going to start blocking in our beach. So because it's a tropical beach, we're going to make the sand really, really bright. So that's why I'm using extremely lots of white, only a little bit of yellow. Now, one of the reasons I don't normally create my outlines in pencil is you can see here was when you're using a pastel colour, the grey of the pencil is smearing into my beautiful beach, which I don't like. And I'm getting horrible sort of smears, these grey smears, which I really don't like. So that is one of the reasons I normally paint my canvas burnt sienna, if you're ever watching along at home. And I use chalk as an outline, because chalk doesn't leave any dirty marks. So if at home you've used a pencil and you're getting dirty marks like me, don't worry, again, just like the whites that we use for the ocean, you can always wait till it dries and just go over the top and just repaint it, and it'll get rid of any horrible grey marks. So let's just block her in, and she's done. So I'm going to swap to a fan brush. Now a fan brush is just a fan shaped brush, and I'm going to get some sap green, some cobalt blue to make it look nice and dark, and a tiny bit of the raw umber brown and some more cobalt blue, and I'm going to create a nice dark shadow colour. And because this brush is shaped like a fan, it's really good for painting leaves and grass. So we're going to paint some wild sort of sea grass. So sometimes at beaches you get this sort of long wispy grass. So we're just going to create some divots in our sand again to give it some texture. Now I think I've used quite a harsh colour here. I think it's a bit too dark, but again, don't worry, we can fix it. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just using the brush, I'm just flicking it sideways just to create the illusion of divots in the sand where some of this wild grass is coming up. And by using a dark colour here in the foreground, like things like our corners, again what it does is it frames the painting to get you to look down the middle, but also these things are closer to the viewer. So by using darkest colours nearest, it brings it forward and it pushes back our cliffs and makes them look far off into the distance. So if you ever want anything close to the viewer, use darker colours, and if you ever want to push it back into the distance, use lighter colours. So again, just try to leave gaps so that nice sand colour shines through. So let's just have some fading off into the distance. Just have some in between these fence posts. You get bits of grass popping up, don't you? And then let's just get some orange and add that to our mix. And some purple, just a tiny bit of purple. We're just trying to create a warmer colour, hence the orange. So these can be bits of grass that are a bit dried out in the sun on the beach. So they've gone a bit beige, a bit orange from all the sunlight. Again, we're just creating texture. And then let's add a tiny bit of yellow to the mix to make it less harsh. And then let's just add again, just some grass sort of fading off into the distance. So by making it less harsh, look, and more pastel, we can have this bits of grass that's all getting bleached in the sun, far off. And again, just pushes it away. So again, same trick. Darks for things in the foreground, more pastel lighter colours for things off in the distance. And it really helps with this brush. They are literally $1 or £1. So look, just turning it sideways and just creating these little scoops, these little divots. It makes your life so much easier because the brush just does it for you. So let's go back to our beach colour, which was just loads and loads of white and a tiny hint of yellow and a dot of purple. And look, if you've done too much, you've gone a bit trigger happy with your fan brush like me, you can always do this trick where you can just put in little bits of the beach colour and just change it up. So just like what we did with the mountains, if anything ever goes wrong, just mix up some of the base colour for your beach, and you can just poke holes. If anyone's watched all the other tutorials, we often do this with clouds, where we poke holes in the clouds to make it look realistic. Same principle. We're just literally using some of that beach colour. I'm just going to mix some brown and some purple together to create a grey. So brown and purple. And a little bit of cobalt blue. And I'm going to start painting in these pillars. So all I'm trying to do, I'm trying to make them a base colour. So a bit like what we've done with the mountains. And all I'm trying to do is make them darker. So I think I'm going to add a little bit more brown. So I want them a lot darker than the mountains because I want to bring them closer to the viewer. So cobalt blue and raw umber brown. That's better. There we go. And all we're going to do, we're just going to colour all of our little fence posts here. Now I've tried to use perspective. I'm not very good at drawing perspective, but I've kind of done it. So what we've got big fat sort of pillars, and they're getting thinner and shorter as they move off into the distance, and it should look like they're fading off. So these ones are going to be thicker and longer, and this one's going to be really chunky to bring it closer. And then while we've got that colour, I'm just going to create, I was trying to create sort of a wooden plank path. So sometimes you get in the beaches, they have like sort of like a bit like a jetty at a marina where they use like wooden planks so your feet doesn't get burnt on the hot sand. So I'm just going to use this colour as our shadow colour. And I'm deliberately leaving little gaps just so it looks like planks of wood. So I want to try and make them sort of like rectangular. And then just going to make it fade off into the distance. Just be less harsh, less paint. It fades off. And then just go get some white and some brown. So white and brown to create this nice pastel brown sort of colour. And then I'm going to get white, purple and brown to create a greyer, darker colour. Can add a little bit of cobalt blue as well if you want to. So we've got a light one and a cool one. So the cool colour with it's basically white, purple, brown and blue. On one side of the pillar, that's going to be all the area of the pillar in shade. And I'm going to literally leave gaps again so the underpainting looks like it's shining through. So I'm just leaving little thin gaps, and that's going to create the illusion of bark. So by leaving lines of that darker shadow colour to shine through and not covering up all of it, I can make it look 3D and make it look like it's wooden and bark like. So just try to think, if the sun's coming from one side, all the pillars will have shadow on the same side, and then they'll all have highlights on the same side. So I'm just going to use the lighter colour on the right. I'm going to have the cooler colour on the left. And what it does is it makes these fence posts, these pillars, look like one side is in the dark and one side's in the light. But I'm still leaving little gaps for that dark shadow colour to make it look wooden. So even if I change the colour, I still want to do the same technique. And again, it's so much easier using a flat brush because it's easier to paint a straight line. Here we go. And let's get some purple and brown to create grey. And I'm just going to make these far away pillows. I'm just going to go over the top and glaze them just like we did with the wave. And by using purple and brown, I can make them look less harsh, because I want to make these ones look like they're off in the distance. See how that works? Let's add a little bit of white to the mix of this brown and white. And a tiny bit of yellow, just give it a bit of heat. So brown, white and yellow. And let's just give the wood on the right hand side a little bit more sunlight. Just blend it into the previous colour. Here we go. Let's do the same on this one. So just white, brown, and a little bit of yellow to create a nice highlight colour on the right hand side of all these fence posts. Do the same on these ones. And then let's get some of the shadow colour. And let's do the opposite. Let's do a really harsh outline now on the left hand side. Now you can add a tiny bit of Payne's grey here in the foreground. Now Payne's grey is basically cobalt blue and black, like a very dark Prussian blue. So cobalt blue and black. And just on the left hand side of some of these bigger pillars, you can always make them a lot darker, just to give them a harsh shadow. So this is just all the areas that are in the shade. Just underneath here in the foreground. So let's just do this one. Underneath would be getting dark. And don't worry if you go a bit wonky, because you can always use the beach colour to change the shape of your fence posts. There we go, just outline a few. And then let's go back to our flat brush. Let's add a little bit more brown and orange, white. And let's just block in our planks of wood. So again, the same principle, we're just going to create some planks. We're going to leave some gaps in the underpainting to look like shadow. And we're just going to leave some gaps in the middle. So there's difference in planks. So by leaving a little dark outline, it looks like one plank. And then a bit of a divide between the next plank. So there we go. Look at that. How easy that was, just by using the flat brush. So this is really good for texture. Using that sharp edge of the brush. And then let's just add a little bit of yellow and white to the mix, just like we did with the fence posts. Excuse my hands a bit blurred, it's a bit zoomed in. But it's exactly what we did with the fence posts, and just a hint on some of the planks. We're just going to put a highlight, really subtle. Again, just to create the divide. There we go. So that's all blocked in. I'm happy with that. So let's get some purple and some cerulean blue. So purple, cerulean blue, and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. A tiny bit of brown to create a purpley grey. A little bit of white so it's not as harsh. And let's create some shadows. So these are just some shadows that are not too harsh. Let's create sort of a nice bluey purple. So we can have some for our fence posts. Let's have some here in the foreground. I think I've done that one completely wonky, but never mind. Should be over here, but never mind. Let's even have some just coming off these planks of wood, leaving some shadows on the beach. And then we're going to have some palm trees and lots of bushes, sort of making the painting look more framed. So we're going to have some either side of that, so we can have some of these shadows coming round here. They could be shadows of leaves and bushes. And then let's clean our brush and let's get some white, some yellow, and just put some highlights. I'm going to use a fine liner. And I'm just going to put bits of sand that are creeping in between these planks. So where you get bits of sand, half the time these wooden planks and things, they're quite wonky, quite bobbly with the texture. So you have little bits of sand peeking through. And as I say, look, you can always change the texture. So if you don't like anything, if you've mucked up your shadows or anything, look, you can always paint over it. So a little bit of sand just peeking through here. There we go. It's just trying to create some definition between planks, really. Just so they're not all the same. They look haggard and old, like me. There we go. Okay. So let's get some of the same colour. Let's add plenty of yellow. Let's just make this highlight look a bit nicer. So just like the white, as I said, sometimes with highlights, when you lay them, they look incredibly bright, and then the paint dries and it absorbs some of the colour. And because we use the really harsh shadow colour, remember, sometimes these highlights are really going to fade. So by just going over the top and just reapplying paint, sometimes it's really worth it. So I just want this harsh sunlight sort of beaming down on these fence posts. And then when you're happy with all of them and you've done all your highlights, we're going to mix one last colour. So we're just going to get some orange and mix that into our beach colour. So orange, white, tiny bit of yellow and some brown. And we're going to create sort of like a brick colour. So like a warm orangey brown. And then we're just going to highlight again just on the right. Just so it looks like some of that sunlight. It's nice and warm. So again, just to make these pillars look less harsh. And you can use this colour if you want to. Just here on some of the planks of wood. Again, just to imply some detail. Just a little bit more colour in them. So I'm just glazing over the top. here in the foreground. And then if I get some Payne's grey, and I'm just going to create some little boat holes in these little pillars, and I'm going to draw a little bit of a rope. So you sometimes have a nice bit of rope sort of connecting these sort of areas. So by just using a little bit of Payne's grey, dark grey. As I say, you can mix black and cobalt blue if you haven't got Payne's grey. But I'm trying to use really harsh colours just here in the foreground, because that's where the most harshest shadows are going to be. So let's just create a little sort of rope bridge. There we go. So I'm just interlocking these areas just to make it look like some rope. And again, by using a really thin brush, it makes my life so much easier. You don't have to have it really straight. Don't worry if it's a bit wonky. Sometimes the rope hangs a bit. I'm just going to create these little holes. I think this is still a bit wet. So let's just put some little holes in here. All I'm going to do is just going to neaten up here. So what you can do, you can get some of, once it's dry, you can get some of the beach colour and you can straighten up some of your pillars. So mine are a bit wonky. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get some of that colour. I'm just going to straighten it up by painting some of the background in. There we go. So I'm just adding some texture and I'm just making some of these pillars less ropey. So look, let's just make this one a bit thinner. So if some of yours are like mine, where you've been putting highlights and things on, if they're a bit haggard, a bit scruffy, just mix some of the background colour and just go around them. And I'm just adding some white to the mix. So I'm just getting a load of white on top. I'm just adding bits that are in the sunlight. So you can use pure titanium white and just go over areas of your beach. You can add a tiny dot of cad yellow. I just want to have some areas that are really in the sunlight. Just here. And then I'm going to get some of the shadow colour that we were using and some Payne's grey, and I'm just going to start blocking in some of the overhanging palm trees. So we're going to have lots of sort of bushes and sort of foliage sort of coming over to frame the painting, so it looks like you're coming sort of out of a resort or a jungle and you found this lovely pathway down to the beach. So what I'm going to do is just create some like low sort of palm trees, some leaves hanging over. So by using a really dark shadow colour again, we can lay the foundations and then we can put all the highlights over the top. So to create palm leaves, normally you have like a stem and it sort of hangs over. And then all you have to do is come out diagonally from that stem. So look, if I create the stem first, and then all we do is come out diagonally from it. So let's have some spiky stems just sticking out. And then you can always, again, by adding some blue and purple just here, off in the distance, you can always make the tips and these far off fence posts look a little bit less harsh by just using some blue and purple and a little bit of brown. So I'm just making them a bit softer. So that pushes them back, and let's say we can neaten everything up in a minute. We just kind of want what everything's going to be. So let's do some of the palm leaves. So let's get some of this light yellow, light green, excuse me. It's just called light green. It's just a bright green. And all I'm going to do is some areas of these leaves I'm just going to highlight. Just so it's like a nice tropical green. So again, just using that flat brush. Just to have some of these. By having different shades of green, but so using sap green and blue makes areas of your leaves look like they're in the shade. And then by using the light green, it looks like areas are in highlights. So again, just to texturize it, you can have a combination between the two. And as I say, don't be scared to have some hanging over, because what it does is it sort of frames the painting. So it looks like you're walking down through this area. So look, if you want to make it darker in shade, use sap green and cobalt blue. And if you want to make areas look like they're in the light, use the lighter green. So let's have some leaves hanging over here. Add some highlights with that lighter green over the top. So there we go. So again, by leaving gaps so the dark colour can shine through against the light colour, just makes it look more 3D. So there we go. So that's starting to take shape. So let's get some blue, cobalt blue and raw umber brown. And let's get our flat brush and let's do the trunk of our palm tree. So we're going to learn how to paint palm trees. So you always want the trunk to be quite fat and you want it to be thinner at the top than at the bottom. So a bit like your head is a lot thinner than your sort of 2 feet apart, your shoulder width apart. So what we want to do is make the top half of our tree a lot thinner than the bottom. So if we again lay the shadow colour first, and then we can put the highlights and the shadows over the top. So we've got our tree trunk, and then go just get some more paint on my brush. We're going to start painting the leaves. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a stem first, and then I'm going to come down diagonally using my flat brush to create all the sort of spindly bits of the branch. So I create the big stem first, and then I come out diagonally to create all the little bits of the leaf. So look, create the stem, and then come out and create sort of the teeth of the leaf. So stem first. So when I change the angle, you'll hopefully see it. It's just my hands in the way. So look, create the stem. And then look, it's kind of hanging down. So now use the angle of the brush to create the leaves. And just try to think of gravity. So if it's kind of flopping down because of the stems kind of bending, well, all the sort of leaves would be doing that as well. That kind of makes sense. So let's get some more paint on my brush. So look, stem first. There's the stem, and then come down diagonally. So it looks like it's hanging. So look, come down for all the sort of teeth of the leaves. There we go. So if you always do the stem first, it's so much easier to then just come out from it. So look, do the stem, and then come straight out diagonally. And then at the top they have sort of bits that all sort of go off in every direction. Now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to fast forward the video a little bit. I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. So all I'm doing, going over the top, just make it a little bit darker. Same colour. I think what it was just I had too much water on my brush. So I'm just going over with thicker paint. Because I want this to be nice and dark. It's like a silhouette. And while you've got that colour, as I say, it's sort of Payne's grey. You can always darken these posts and make these shadows under these leaves really harsh to make it look more framed. So this is our darkest darks that we want to sort of keep to the foreground. So if you want to put some really harsh shadows just here in the foreground on some of these planks and some of your fence posts, now's the time to do it, because these things are closest to us, so their shadows are going to be the darkest. And then I'm just going to get some brown and some yellow, so raw umber brown and some cad yellow, tiny bit of purple, just a tiny bit, just to make it more grey. And then we're going to create some bark. So we're going to create some knocks on, they have sort of rings on palm trees. So by again just leaving gaps for the dark shadow colours to shine through. We're just going to texturize her. And kind of in the middle, we're just going to lay this sort of nice sort of beige colour. But again, try to leave these little knocks so that it's kind of realistic. And then we're just going to get a tiny bit more white. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of the sky colour just here on the right hand side. So the sky colour was white and cerulean blue with a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And I'm just going to make this outer ridge just kind of a bit softer. And again, just have these sort of rings coming down from that top bit, just to make it look nice and 3D. So same colour as the horizon, white, cerulean blue and a little tiny dot of cobalt blue. And just add a little bit more white just to make it even brighter, just on this outer edge. So this is all the area of the bark that's getting all the sunlight. It's sort of glistening in the sunlight. So while the bark is drying, let's get some sap green, and we're just going to glaze over the top of some of these leaves, so on our palm tree. And we're just going to put sort of a nice dark green. So again, I'm using a flat brush so I can make these branches really thin. So when I go over the top in this green, I can just literally just make them really spindly and elongated. You can even stretch them out, look, to make them look more spiky. So they have these sort of really thin spindles at the end of the leaves. So by just pulling down with that flat-headed brush, you can make them really, really long. So there we go. And then we're going to get some of this light green, which is like a tropical green. So it's just called light green or bright green, I guess. And we're just going to go over some of the highlights to make certain areas look like they're glistening in the sun. You can add a little bit of white to it as well if you want to, and make it even brighter. So again, we're doing the same here. We've got some in the shade, some in the light. And then we want to add some highlights just to some areas of the branch just where you think the sun's going to be. So if the branches are hanging over each other, some areas are going to be in the shade, but some are going to be glistening in the sun. So just try to think where, if your branch was hanging over, would it be creating a shadow? But the very tops of these leaves, these would be sort of glistening in the sun. Sort of like the very edges. So again, just having a combination between different colours, green, can really make a difference, create realism. So let's just do the top here. And then let's just get some Payne's Grey and let's do a really harsh shadow on the sort of boardwalk bit here. On this sort of planks of wood. So we're just going to create a nice shadow. And as I say, if you want to use this really harsh Payne's Grey, you can even put some really harsh shadows on your fence posts in between some of these leaves. So these are really dark in the shade here, and it brings it closer to the view, you see. So it frames the painting and just brings you really, really close. We can even just on this area add a really harsh shadow because this is closest to the viewer. And we can use some of our blue and purple. Mine's dried, so I'm just mixing some again. So blue, purple and brown to create that sort of nice bluey grey that we use for the shadows. So blue, purple and grey. Excuse me, blue, purple and brown. And you'll create a nice bluey grey. And again, look, we're just going to create the shadow of our palm tree. It doesn't have to be exact, but we're just going to have it sort of loop round. Just so it looks like it's casting a nice shadow. And then that shadow is kind of going onto those sort of wooden planks. And then while we've got that colour, why not have some shadows from some of these leaves on the beach? We're just now going to neaten everything up. So now we know where that area is. We can go back to our fine liner and we can get some of the sand colour and we can start really refining everything. So now we've got everything blocked in. Look, we can just do some straight lines in between the planks. And what that does is it just makes the shadows look more realistic. Look, by just going round them, just neatening everything up. So as I say, just spending, the painting always comes alive right at the end. It's kind of like the twist in the movie. It's always the best bit. So by just getting to this point, you've done all the hard work. So now it's just time to just spend your time just refining it, using different types of brushes. So I'm just using a tiny fine liner. And I can get this like really small gaps. I can make my shadows just look nice and tidy. Look, this area's all a bit scruffy. So let's just neaten it all up. So that's why it's important to have faith in yourself. Keep pushing, even if you're uncomfortable. Just keep going, because the painting always comes together at the end. You don't want to have given up too early when you were so close to just creating an absolute masterpiece. So there we go. So let's just have little gaps in here. And as I say, because you've used dark shadow colours, if you have to go over them once or twice, it's quite normal. And I'm going to use this colour, which is called light green or bright green. It's a company called PBO, and they make these pre-mixed colours. But really, if you want to make it at home, it's like a luminous green. It's literally cad yellow and light green to create sort of a really bright lime green. So cad yellow and light green, if you just mix them together, you will get this really bright yellowy green. And all I'm going to do I'm just going to put some really harsh highlights just on some of the leaves, just so it looks like a shimmer in the leaves. So cad yellow and light green, if you mix them together, you should get this really, really bright lime green. Yeah, I put links to the paints I use, but unfortunately, because I live in London, they're not tend to be available in the United States unless you pay a fortune, I'm afraid, which I don't want you to do. So as I say, if you want to mix them yourself, just use bright yellow, cad yellow, and bright lighter green, and you should get this colour. You can add a tiny bit of white, not too much, because it will suck the vibrancy out of the colour. You want it really, really vibrant and bright. So if you put lots of white in, it will take away the colour. So just yellow and green. And I think, as I say, it's sometimes classified as luminous green. But just be careful, because some of the luminous ones are luminous. They look like something out of a horror movie or something. So I'm just going to mix up some green and purple and some blue, and I'm just, where I've done some really bright highlights, I'm just going to obviously just go over some dark areas, just so we've got a nice yin and yang. Just so I've got some areas in the shade, some areas in the light. But she's all coming together. So I'm just trying to think where some of the leaves are hanging down, where they would cast a shadow. And then let's have some just framing the painting just here on the left. So again, let's just have some like palm leaves just sort of coming into the scene. It's just frames there, so move my big arm. There we go. So again, we're just trying to make some of these harsh. And just here, look, if your white is just gone a bit flat, just go over the top, just while you're finishing the painting. Just make sure it's all nice and pretty, all your lines are done. Things like your wave, because that is one of the central focus points, is all nice and finished. And you can even add some white, as I say, to your sand to create highlights on your sand. So if you want to add some whites, you can poke holes in between some of your leaves. You just want to neaten everything up. I've even put some bright white just on the pillars, on the fence post, just to look like sunlight beaming through the leaves. So anything just to like create added bits of detail. So let's just have some sparkling white just coming through. And it just looks like the light coming in between the leaves, you see, and just like reflecting on the floor. So we did a lovely sort of Greek painting the other day, didn't we, with the bougainvillea, and that was kind of similar. We just have sunlight sort of coming in between the petals of the flowers and creating sort of shadows. So again, it's really, really subtle, but it does make just an added layer of realism. So again, just have some here in the foreground. And as I say, if you want to create some harsh shadows as well, just in the foreground, don't be afraid to. Just around your plants and on these nearest fence posts. So I've created some harsh shadows, and I'm just getting some of this light, as I say. It's just white and a tiny dot of yellow, but predominantly white. And I'm just going to put some sparkles of light on the fence posts and on that trunk of my tree. You can even have some little sparkles here on your planks. Look, just having a few bits shining on the planks of the wood. So just finish her off, get your own speed. Only you'll know when you're happy with her. So you're all painting at home. don't forget to tag me with your versions of the tutorial, because I love to see how everyone comes out, and I love to see when people add a little bit to it and take it in another direction, like maybe add someone. You could have a little surfer in the background, or a little windsurfer or something. So don't be afraid to think outside the box. And I think she's finished, so I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So we've got this lovely pushback sky, we've got the darkened corners, we've got these lovely pushback mountains that you've learned how to use cobalt blue to push them back. You've got this blended ocean with the deepest water far off, and then it gets more shallow, and you've learned how to paint waves and sea foam. We've got this lovely beach coming towards us, we've got these fence posts and our planks of wood, and then we've got the tropical plants either side to frame her. And we've got sunlight and shadows, a nice yin and yang to create realism, and using blues and purples to push it back, and using Payne's grey to bring things forward. So we've got these lovely tropical plants just to frame her, and you've learned how to paint palm trees, which is really, really easy. And we've got the shimmer of the sun coming down from it. So my name is Murray. Thank you so much for painting along with me at home. I know it's a hard tutorial, I know it's quite complex, but there's plenty in it and different techniques and mixing colours that you can use on all your artwork at home. So don't forget to like and subscribe and binge on all the tutorials, and happy painting everyone. See you soon, take care, bye bye now.